Parents on Reddit, what was the most embarrassing moment for you caused by your children? When my sister was pregnant with my nephew, my sister kept the baby's name a secret from my then 4-year-old niece. While babysitting my niece, I convinced her that her parents were planning to name the new baby Homeless. She announced her new brother's name to everyone in her daycare, random strangers at the grocery store, or anyone else who would listen. My sister still hasn't forgiven me for that one. I want to imagine your niece still calls the boy Homeless. My daughter's daycare had circle time every morning as a way to start the day. Anyway, we were late and walked into the middle of circle time. My daughter said we're late because my mommy had diarrhea. Oh god, this is my future, I just know it. You're a funny little man, but I like your hat. My 4-year-old said that to a little person in the airport who was wearing a cowboy hat. I practically wanted to keep walking and leave him there. Then I heard the man respond, "Thank you. And you're funny little man too." He was great about it, and several of us ended up smiling instead of being mortified. I feel like it would be hard for a little person to be mad at a child who probably hasn't encountered a little person before. Unless they've already been having a bad day, maybe. Not a parent, but the sibling of child. We were going out to eat and he was pretty young. As we were sitting down at our table, a group of Sikhs walked past and he yelled, "Hey look mom and dad, pirates." We were mortified, but they seemed to think it was hilarious. I still cringe when I think about that. Standing in line at the Home Depot with my daughters, age 3 and 5. We're white, in a mostly white city, and the guy in front of us is black. The 5-year-old points at him and says, plenty loud, "A brown person, what's he doing here?" I begin the head tuck of shame and calmly explain that there are brown people everywhere, even Home Depot. The 3-year-old twists the knife, yelling at full volume he's brown all over. Good times. As a black dude, we don't mind this at all. I've been called a cinnamon man, haha. I'm not a parent, but my brother is 15 years younger than me, so people in public typically think he's mine. We went to the museum when he was about 4 and they had an exhibit about mummies. He was a little rowdy but nothing too bad, and at one point he asked for me to pick him up so he could see one of the mummies through the crowd. The tour guide was giving us all of this historical context on this ornate mummy covered in gold and jewels, and everyone was quietly taking it in and asking very intellectual questions when my little brother shouts as loud as he can, "Look, he doesn't have underwear on. You can see his pee-pee. You could in fact see the mummy's penis." So he wasn't wrong. Upvote for mummy penis. My 5-year-old son was kind of obsessed with little people. We ran into the local supermarket to get milk and there was a man pulling milk out of the case. My kid shouts, "Look, it's a nibbit," his word for midget, and then tried to follow the guy through the store. The worst thing was that the man wasn't a dwarf. He was about 5 feet tall, so just short. I was waiting in A&E with my 3-year-old son after he swallowed a thumbtack. I needed to pee and had to take him with me into the small toilet beside the waiting room. I'm midstream and he shouts out in his best voice, "Dad, your willy is so big." Everyone in the packed waiting room heard him and the rest of the wait was pretty awkward. I nearly died of embarrassment. When I worked at Target, I took a break to use the bathroom. As I'm sitting in the stall, a father and his 5-year-old son comes in and used the stall next to me. As the father was pee, his son goes, "Wow daddy, your penis looks like a rocket ship." It took so much energy to hold in my laughter. Once we invited a couple from church over to our house for the first time to watch a Bears game. At the time my son was 3 or 4 and would refer to the teams by their jersey color. Well, that day they were playing the Falcons and the Bears were in white. A few minutes into the game, my son wanders up to me and quietly asks which one is Bears. I told him it was the white team, to which he then shouts out, "Yeah, we cheer for the white guys, because we don't like black guys. Right dad?" I had to awkwardly say yes. The Falcons are wearing black, and today we do not like them because they're against the Bears. Everyone laughed a bit, but there were some side glances. When I was a kid I used to refer to my grandparents as black granddad and white granddad because I got fed up calling them both granddad and not having a way to distinguish between them. But they were both white. I was referring to their hair color. My daughter, myself and her father are all white. My daughter's primary care doctor is black. She was a premature and she saw her doctor very regularly. Whenever she was learning to associate mommy and daddy, I think she got something mixed up because she would point to any black man and say daddy. I think possibly she thought doctor equals father figure equals daddy or something. But the most embarrassing yet funniest one was when I was in line at Walmart. A black man with his white girlfriend walked by me and my daughter. She points at him and loudly screams daddy. The girlfriend's head turned so fast and looked him down heavy. He made a gesture with his hands like that Neil deGrasse Tyson badass meme and shook his head saying no baby. I bet that dude heard about it all the way home. Not my kid, but a friend's. He took his young daughter to dance ballet class, and once the instructor starts the class the outside door locks and you have to ring the doorbell to get in. Well, he is standing in the watching area shortly after class starts and the doorbell rings from a late arrival to class. His daughter runs over and yells, "Daddy, daddy, is that the goddamn Jehovah Witnesses again?" At this time he learned his daughter repeats what he says around the house. This is freaking awesome. When my son was 4 and watched Space Jam, he thought every black man was Michael Jordan. When we would go somewhere, he would point at every black man he saw and yell Michael Jordan. This sounds hilarious. I was a witness to a 4 or 5-year-old boy embarrass his dad in front of a big crowd at a talk. So, I work in a zoology research institute, and once a year, we open our doors to the public. It's always been very popular because we have loads of cool things to show everyone. So the dad, a highly respected professor of zoology, was giving an outdoor talk about intelligence in birds. Specifically, great T. Halfway through the talk, his son asked the most philosophical question any 5-year-old could have asked. He stood up, grabbed his dad by the hand and loudly asked the question, "Daddy, daddy, what would happen if my pee-pee was where my bum is, and my bum was where my pee-pee is?" The crowd burst out laughing, and the talk dissolved. Good times. In the toilets at a local supermarket, Mother Nature was paying her visit. My 4-year-old son came in the toilet with me, went running out of the toilet to announce to his grandma and the rest of the supermarket that my mummy has a piece of string hanging out of her bum. Not me, but my brother when he was young, I think like 3. My dad took him shopping and had him sitting in the front of the cart. Little brother very loudly yells, "Daddy, you fart. You farted, daddy." Dad tries to quietly explain to him that he didn't fart and that he shouldn't yell that. Brother continues to yell, "Yeah, you did, daddy. You farted." Dad gives up trying to reason with him and instead squeezes his hand just the littlest bit, as a signal to say that it's time to stop now. Brother stops yelling about the farts and instead yells, "OW daddy, stop squeezing, that hurts, OW." Awkward glares all around. My daughter routinely blames all her farts on her daddy even when he's not home. She does it in public too. Not quite what you've asked, but here goes. I've taught my nearly 5-year-old to call out my wife's name whenever we get separated in a store. Now, that on the surface sounds like a good idea. Let me tell you, this was half of my intent. The other half is because it embarrasses my wife greatly. My wife will go 1 aisle away from us for something, and our daughter will start yelling, deep breath, until she comes back. Not her name, but same amount of syllables. Just enough so that people nearby start snickering when she comes back to hush her and to remind her to call her mom. I'm working on getting her to yell, "Mother dearest." My daughter is 8 now, but when she was 2, I taught her to say behold instead of look. We'd be at the store or something and she'd go to point out whatever dang thing she saw. "Daddy, behold." There's this guy who works at the local Costco who was born with no arms. He just has hands coming out of his shoulders. My daughter, who was around 3 or 4 at the time, pointed at him and went ha 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 ha. We taught our kids the proper names for male and female genitalia from a young age. When my middle son was around 3, he would constantly point at different people and say penis if it was a guy and vagina if it was a girl. We tried to get him to stop saying the words in public, but eventually figured it would make more sense to not make a big deal out of it and wait for him to get tired of it and stop. We were at the mall one day and the cashier was ambiguous looking. I myself wasn't entirely sure of their gender until I saw her name tag. My son looks at her and says, "Penis or vagina?" Which one? Surprisingly, she didn't seem offended and said, "I'm a girl." To which my son responded, "Oh, vagina." He also refers to a vulva as a Volvo. I asked my mom for her answer. When you were around 6 or 7, you went through a stage where you tried to translate Spanish words to English in the most literal sense. It was funny, until you started screaming, "Stop molesting me" to your brother at the grocery store. In Spanish, to annoy someone is molester, so yeah, sorry, ma. Those false cognates all jetcha. My daughter decided to strip completely naked, nappy and all in the shop when I had my back turned for about 5 seconds. I only became aware when a lovely lady tapped me on my shoulder and whispered into my ear, "Excuse me love, your child is dancing naked beside the potatoes." I did try to hide my laugh. For a period of time after my daughter realized she could get her clothes off herself, she'd instantly strip down anytime my attention strayed for a brief second. Sometimes I think I had a "I'm not even angry, I'm impressed" reaction to how fast she could do that. When I was 5 or 6, we were at my dad's company picnic. I was introduced to his boss and I told him, "My daddy says you're a son of a b." My dad's co-workers fed me ice cream all afternoon. Oh my gosh, I hope your dad wasn't fired. So I took the kids to see Jurassic World when it came out. Right at the peak of the epic dinosaur battle, my 7-year-old son needs to go pee. I don't want to miss the dino fight, so I ask, "Can you go by yourself?" He confidently says yes, so I tell him to go ahead. Off he goes, with proper "excuse me" yes along the row of seats. Very proud. A moment later the theater is filled with bright sunlight coming from the corner. It's him opening the emergency exit by mistake. I'm a bit embarrassed, but I'm certain he will realize his error. Nope. Just a momentary pause. Then outside he goes, door locking behind him. Cue me scrambling over folks in my row, trying to grab the backs of the seats in the row in front of me to balance myself, but forgetting that they recline. So I freak out a half dozen people who are violently reclined for no reason as I'm half falling into the people in my row. I finally get out of my row and run down the stairs and out the same emergency exit. Lots of people laughing now as they see what went down. I get outside and he's nowhere to be found. Now I'm concerned. I sprint around the huge theater complex and into the front doors, breathlessly running by the startled ticket guy saying something like "Kid missing. If you see him, keep him here. No worries." Being resourceful, he just walked around the building and parking lot until he found the front doors again. Found him in the bathroom, cool as a cucumber, having his pee. Kids are awesome. This can't be right. Frick it, I'll probably figure it out. I'm not the parent, but I do have a story about my brother. He has autism, and when he was 5, he was very attached to a squirrel beanie baby appropriately named Nuts. He carried this squirrel everywhere. Once, when my grandparents were in town, we all went out to eat, and naturally my brother brought Nuts along. My grandfather, however, was not having any of this. He thought it was improper for children to bring toys to the dinner table. My mother warned him to just let it go, but my grandfather was persistent. When we were all seated, my grandfather took matters into his own hands and snatched the squirrel away from my brother. Cue brother screaming. Except he was screaming "Don't touch my nuts" and crying hysterically, causing a huge scene in the restaurant. Every turn to give my grandfather dirty looks. Humiliated, my grandfather gave him back his squirrel. TLDR. Grandfather took away my brother's toy, ends up looking like a pedophile. I'm sure he never did it again after that. I had just reached the age where I began making comparisons. That is, this pillow is blue like the sky. At the grocery store waiting in line, a black gentleman was waiting behind my mother. My childlike wonder zoomed in and I whispered to my mom, "That man has dark skin." I guess we hadn't had the "there are other races than white people" talk, so my mom just whispered back, "Yes, there are lots of people with different colored skin." I whispered back, "His skin is the same color as burned bacon." Naturally, my mortified mother whispered back, "You can't say that about people. That's mean." I apparently decided that whispering was overrated and screamed, "It's not mean. That man has skin like burned bacon." He laughed, thought it was hysterical. I've never seen my mom pay and check out that fast since. I like how the parallel you drew was burned bacon. This is actually a story from when I was a kid that was pretty embarrassing for my parents. When I was 6, the 1980 Winter Olympics were going on, and I became a huge fan of the US hockey team that won the gold medal. One day in school as the Olympics were in progress, my first grade teacher, Mrs. Silverstein, gave my class an assignment to draw a picture of something that made us happy. I drew what was making me the happiest at that time, the US hockey team winning a game. For some reason I wanted to draw a picture of the players shaking hands after the game, and the game that had just happened was when the US played the West German team. So I drew a bunch of hockey players all shaking hands, and the US flag, and having no idea what the West German flag looked like, but with a recent field trip to Lacherhurst NJ where the Hindenburg crashed still fresh in my mind, I knew what the German flag from back in the 30s looked like, so I drew that as well. So my drawing that I turned into Mrs. Silverstein was a bunch of guys shaking hands in front of the US flag and a Nazi swastika. I remember being quite confused when my parents had to bring me to meet with the teacher and a vice principal to discuss the inappropriateness of my drawing. I was waiting outside the changing room cubicles for my sister and niece after a swimming lesson. Suddenly, a shocked little voice pipes up, "Mummy, you have hair on your badge, Jenna." Former child here. Attempted to embarrass parent. Parent flipped, it embarrassed me. I was dragged along on a shopping trip, which I dreaded when I was about 12 years old. Now my mother is a heavy-set and conservative woman. As she was in the line for checkout, I picked up a tiny blue thong from a nearby display and shouted, "Hey mom, did you want this or should I just put it back?" waving it in the air, drawing looks from the crowded store. My mother never missed her beat and shouted back, "No," I said I wanted the red one. The red one. Mom, one obnoxious tween 0, former child. For some reason this is the funniest part of the post. When my oldest was about 3, we were on a walk and my son decides to announce to a random woman on the street, "I have a little pee-pee and my dad has a big pee-pee. So, yeah." She responded, "Good for your dad," with the knowing smile of someone with little kids. Substitute dad with bro, and that's me as a wingman. I drank a couple really sugary drinks and I guess combined with something else I had a really bad yeast infection. It was Easter weekend and I had about 100 things to do, and taking the bus to Walmart with my 4-year-old seemed like the worst. My daughter catches me scratching myself and she goes, "Mommy, I think you need to go pee," and I was like, "No honey, mommy just needs some cream for her vagina," trying to be the honest parent I am. So she comes out with diaper cream and I was like, "No, no. Thank you though. I need a different kind. I'll buy it at Walmart." So of course we get to the pharmacy section of Walmart and I'm comparing prices of Canesten and Manastat and all those other overpriced creams, and she says, quite loudly in the busy store, "Oh mom, is that the special cream you need for your itchy vagina?" Needless to say, I'm a little more discreet with my problems now. Me, at 4yo, a very, read, non-stop, chatty child, in a crowded shop, clear as a bell, chirpy as a bird. My daddy slept on top of my mummy last night. Bunk beds. We had just arrived on holiday on an overnight ferry, and my parents slept in bunk beds, with my dad in the top one. They've never let me forget it, though I suspect it's cause they never will either. ETA, as a bonus, here's another one of many. I have a new baby sister and my mummy has a sore bottom. My mother and grandmother once took the youngest cousins, 4 and 7, respectively at a time, to the grocery store. Everything was going well, the oldest even helping out while the youngest held onto the side of the cart, until they passed the wine and beer. The 4yos becomes excited. She ran over to a display of Heineken, bright green boxes stacked neatly at perfect toddler eye level. "Sparkle water," she yells, wrapping her skinny arms around one of the cases and trying in vain to lift it. Alarmed, her aunt tries to tell her that that's not for children and to leave it alone. 4yo shakes her head violently and becomes louder. "Nada, I wanna drink sparkle water. Oma gives it to me all the time." For clarification, Oma is a German nickname for grandma. By now the other patrons are watching the scene as they pass by this screaming child begging for a case of beer and still trying to get her prize into their cart. My mother is trying her best to pull her niece away from the section while the older sister helpfully tells our grandmother that Oma, their maternal grandmother and originally from Germany, Give them both a small cup of beer before bedtime to help them go to sleep. Now mortified both by this information and the acting out, they finally scoop the crying girl up and hastily check out. I wasn't privy to it, but I hear my uncle got a nasty earful when he came to pick them up. TLDR. Toddler throws hissy fit for alcohol. Found out her other grandma facilitates underage drinking. Underage drinking is like a teenager. I think we should call this something else. I just don't know what. Not a parent, but when I was in high school, my girlfriend at the time had a little brother who was about 2.5 years old. We were at the local sports arena watching her sister's cheerleading competition. My girlfriend and myself went to the concession stand and her mom asked us to bring her brother so he could get a snack. I throw the little dude up on my shoulders and we head to the concession area. As we are walking up, there is a black gentleman in line right next to us. In one of the most excited voices, the little brother goes, "Wow, look." I tease a chocolate covered man, so many people around us heard him and tried not laughing. I don't know where it came from. It's not like it was the first time he ever saw a black person. Yeah, but it was probably his first time seeing a chocolate covered person. My mom tells this story about my sister all the time. Mom and sis are at a shoe store. Sis is about 4 at the time, and she won't stop staring at a black lady trying on shoes. There wasn't anything peculiar about this woman, so my mother asks my sister why she's staring at her. My sister replies loudly, "Mommy, that lady is covered in poop." The odd thing is my mother had black friends that my sister knew. My mom was met with a judgmental stare by the woman, and so mom pulls the classic "I am not racist. My best friends are black." My sister doesn't remember the ordeal. Oh god, no. When my son was in kindergarten, I got a call from his teacher. He was usually a good kid, and his teacher was very chill, so I was surprised to hear from her. She told me that my son had gotten in trouble that day for telling some kid in line to get the frick out of my way. I was mortified, of course, but the worst was yet to come. She said, I asked him where he heard that word and he said mommy says it all the time. Not my kid, but a story about me. My mom once told me that she and I were in a Sears or something when I was like 3-4, and this overweight black guy walked in. Apparently I saw, pointed, then screamed, "Mom, look, it's the nutty professor." The poor dude then looked at my mom and said, "Geez, do I really look that bad?" Mom wanted to just sink into the floor and die. I'd love to hear his weight loss story about how he met a kid who called him the nutty professor. My little boy is autistic. When he was 3 and finally starting to be verbal, he would just try out sounds. Mostly they were just his verbal interpretations of musical sounds. At one point Igga became the sound of the week, and he tried it out with all sorts of letters to start that with. The wife and I thought we were going to get lucky and he'd move on to the next sound habit before the inevitable happened. But no. One day in the middle of the grocery store, the D sound, digger, 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 morphed into an N sound, rather abruptly and loudly. The shopping trip ended right then and there. He was struck on various sing-song patterns of that for about a week. No matter how we tried to get him to do something else, we stayed home a lot that week. Please, please, please tell me you didn't freak up and not record this. Not the parent, but I'll speak for them since they have no idea what Reddit is. My parents threw a huge house party and had just recently purchased a new mattress, getting rid of their old waterbed. My brother and I, 6 and 4 years old, respectively, missed the waterbed so much. We went back into their room while they were entertaining guests and proceeded to use sandcastle buckets to transfer water from the hot tub onto their new mattress. We succeeded in emptying about half of the hot tub before anyone noticed. Long story short, another new mattress was bought, along with new carpeting. I am not a parent, but one parent was pretty embarrassed when her 4-year-old son asked my sister, "Why is there poop on your face?" My sister and I are black. There aren't many of us in this town. Nice to see that there are more than one of us in this thread. When my son was little, he would be fascinated by my watch. It had one of those timer dials that could be turned. He used to love to do that. Whenever he was around me, he would say, "Daddy's clock, Daddy's clock." We were in Walmart and passed a display of watches and some looked like mine. He started shouting, "Daddy's clock, Daddy's clock," but he could not say the L. There was a few mortified older women standing nearby. I love daddy's dong. My mother was traveling with my brother when he was about 3 or 4. Well, my brother was a bit of a worrier and kept asking my mother questions that you probably shouldn't ask on an airplane, like what happens if the plane crashes, etc. My mom was trying to quiet him down, but he wouldn't leave it alone. My mom travels for work a lot, so she had been upgraded to first class, and after a while of my brother asking these questions, the gentleman across the aisle tells my mom to get my brother to be quiet in a less than polite way, and chastised her parenting skills. After he was finished, there was a second of silence before my brother looks at my mom and asked her, "Are you going to call this guy an butthole, or am I going to have to?" My 3 almost 4-year-old daughter started singing Old MacDonald Had a Farm to the elderly gentleman standing in line in front of who was wearing denim overalls. He eventually turned toward her and she asked if he would be her dad. The color my face turned should have a crayon dedicated to it. I could write a novel on the embarrassing crap my kids have done. Just this past Saturday I was grocery shopping and had to bend down to tie my shoe. My 4-year-old son is in the cart and laughs as loud as his little body can and says, "Ha ha ha ha. Look at mommy's big butt." My husband is always teasing me about my big butt. He loves it. So my 4-year-old has picked up on that and couldn't pass up his golden opportunity to have 30 people in the produce section stare at me. Me and the 3-year-old I was looking after at the time were getting on a busy bus. I sat her down in an available seat and stood near her. She says in a voice loud enough for the whole bus to hear, "I don't want to sit next to a black man." He was black, but she just meant stranger. I was mortified. He laughed. Getting on a busy bus. I read that as getting busy on a bus. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.